What do CEOs need to know about sales these days? A lot. Outdated sales strategies and tactics plague most companies today. Listen to what innovative CEOs and experts have to say about how to change all that with Sales Talk for CEOs. Welcome to Sales Talk for CEOs. I'm excited about the guest that we have today. He started in his company as an engineer with no idea that he would become the CEO. Being at this company for 18 years, 7 of them in the CEO seat, he's learned a lot on his journey, and I'm excited to hear his story. Marko, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, Marko, tell us a little bit about what your company does and who you sell to.
Sure. The name of the company is Jatheon Technologies. We're in a compliance space, and we sell to government, education, healthcare, and finance companies, specifically equipment that deals with compliance, and more specifically deals with communication compliance, so email, WhatsApp, instant messaging, social media compliance in general.
Well, that's really important, especially today with wanting to have our communications protected, right? And especially with any kind of HIPAA compliance that we have for medical and others. So it sounds like that's a complex sale, and we'll jump into that a little bit more later. But complex meaning long sales cycles, lots of people involved in the process, and it sounds like engineers need to be involved sometimes when we're doing the selling.
Yeah, and that's precisely it. One of the reasons that I ended up being a CEO is because it is a very complex sale and it involves many different technical titles, I guess, to improve and approve the sale process. And it requires a very, very, very long sales cycle that has a lot of different ups and downs. So it is. It is more of a requirement to have a technical lead or at least some kind of professional services lead on with every salesperson who doesn't necessarily need to be technical. And we can talk more about that whole approach to selling these compliance deals.
So take us back 18 years ago when you joined the company. What were you doing right before that? And what prompted you to start working for this company?
Sure. So I did a number of different startups with the same management team, and I was very young and started working with the management team right in high school. Actually, we did high school co-op and then university co-op, and I've been working with the same team through multiple different startups in a technology role. This is, dating me, but this is way back when the web just started. Windows 95 came out, and we were building web pages first for big companies like Dofasco, now U.S. Steel, and so on here in Toronto, Canada. And uh, as these companies got sold, I was always just a technical role when I finished university, and I finished bachelor's of engineering in university, and started working as a engineer. Very specifically for Jatheon, we looked at two different companies of whether one or the other would be a better suited project for the management team. There was one that was dealing with um, data over power lines, so basically plugging in your modem, your internet modem, into a power outlet and then running data over power lines. And the second one was compliance because Enron just went down, and that caused a whole bunch of different legal changes and created the whole archiving industry where you need to retain data for 7 years in case the lawyers need it. Um,
Right.
so Jatheon was the choice that we decided on, and I was involved in evaluating the technical aspects of the company, of both companies, and we chose Jatheon. And we were brought in to replace the original founder who got it to basically a science project stage. They got the MVP. They had something that they've shown to a number of different companies, but they couldn't really make a business out of it. And we were brought in to really create a business out of this, what was then an appliance product for archiving data.
Very good. So you joined the company and you did exactly that. And what was your next move inside the company? I'm sure they recognized very quickly that you were very knowledgeable. They had worked with you before. They knew you had a lot of capabilities. So where did you go from there?
Sure, it's not very obvious, but we did raise money. So we did 3 rounds of raises between 2005 and 2008, and the plan was to actually raise enough money, get to multiples in revenue, about 5,500,000 EBITDA, and then sell it. So this is basically your very standard startup journey. Unfortunately, in 2007, 2008, we had a massive market turmoil and a massive recession, and we went from 32 people down to 6.
Wow.
Yeah, so it wasn't going according to plan. So we were burning a whole bunch of money. We had to cut, and at that time, we basically lost almost everyone from my original management team that was brought in into the company. I stayed because I needed to address some technical issues, and also they wanted me to carry on with running the technology part of the business, and that was my first journey into management. And I say management in quotes is because we really didn't have any management at the time. We just had a whole bunch of sales and tech people with no management whatsoever that were under a CEO that was not very close to business and not very knowledgeable about business. And so we ran that for about 5 years while trying to break even. So we went back into the cash flow positive state by 2013. And in that time, I did all kinds of different roles. I did a lot of professional services, assisting our one salesperson, just trying to sell this very technical product. Then doing support on anyone who we signed on board, doing development when I had time, especially on the hardware pieces that we had, and so on. So very tumultuous time where I had to wear many, many hats, and everybody else had to wear many, many hats compared to just a few years before where we had very defined roles.
Yeah, well, you were back to sort of like typical startup mode, right? You had grown past that and now you're back to, everybody's an entrepreneur, just dig in and do it, right? Sounds like you had a little bit of rogue, kind of stuff going on for a while there, right?
Yeah.
But you did get back to profitability, which is great. Now, at that time, I don't think you were still expecting to become the CEO.
No, that was actually almost never the case. I mean, I've had various different processes relying on me, and I did those. And the more time that passed, the more process I've done in the company, and I had to replace myself. So for professional services, I've done it myself. Then I had to hire to replace myself, and then for development on the hardware, I had to replace myself. And the more I've done that, the more I understood various different areas of the business. And I wasn't really involved with sales for except for the demos. I mean, I really wasn't involved with the sales process or structure or uh, quotas or anything like that for a long time, even after that. Um, Jatheon had the terminus couple of years, 2013 to 2016 range, and that was because we had a number of CEOs now change and have their own directions for the company. And eventually, I was basically the only man standing, and the board voted me in 2017 as the CEO. So that's when I really started to directly impact the sales team and hire and deal with the sales process directly.
Well, it sounds like you had exactly the right experience, though. And it's so interesting becoming the CEO after playing all those different roles. And like you said, building it and then replacing yourself and moving on to the next thing. Most CEOs don't get that experience to know their company so well by having done so many of the roles. So I think that really puts you at an advantage that you might not have even realized.
Absolutely. I would say I agree with that 100%. And I would say that most of the CEOs that I am in contact with, I mean, I am part of many different organizations where we do CEO roundtables, and we exchange our experiences, which I, you know, on a side note, I could recommend that highly for anyone who is coming up to the ranks or for anyone who is in the CEO position. Having the ability to talk to your peers about the problems that you're having is invaluable, and any sort of organization that does that is something that you definitely will be a member of. But that aside, the experience that I've learned about doing professional services, about doing support and doing all different parts of the business, helped me understand where I need to assign resources and what resources should be assigned. It did not help me on how to hire, and especially when I have to fire. So the timing is definitely not there, but I did learn a lot about what the job entails, and I think that helped tremendously in figuring out how to scale it later.
Yeah. Well, on the job training for a CEO is typically what it is, right? Like, who knows how to be a CEO before they're a CEO? Because there's no school for CEO, right?
Yep.
And I mean, I think some people do have it in their mind that they want to be a CEO. So they're learning and growing and reading some books that are going to help prepare them for leadership. But in your case, you learned it by doing all the various and different jobs. So, but then that left the kind of the soft skills of CEOing, like managing people, hiring and firing, stuff you didn't have a lot of experience with. You had to learn it the hard way, which isn't always the most fun way to learn it. But let's talk a little about your experience with sales then. So you said, along the way, you were doing a lot of different things. You were COO, you were CTO, and you interfaced with sales for sure and helped them and supported them. But you really didn't know exactly what sales was doing, and you certainly didn't have to manage sales at that point. So let's step into that piece of your CEO role.
Sure, and you're absolutely right. Understanding what sales does day to day is, I think it's simple but not easy. You always sort of know that they're doing something on the phone, they're doing something on an email, and the sale happens. But the details of that are so intricate that I can spend an hour just on that. What I really didn't know, and where I was really weak, is the structure of the sales organization. So things like, how do you set up the comp plan? How do you set up the commissions plan? What you should approve on a discount side and what you shouldn't approve, what deals we should just pass on. So all of the details that you really don't know without having a lot of experience in an area. These are the biggest issues. So when I took over as a CEO, my two weakest areas by far were sales and finance. I had to report to the board. We had venture money. We had a board of directors, and reporting to the board was very new. And using the financial dictionary and using the financial tools was very new, but so was the sales. And they would ask me questions on both of these areas where I had to really, really get up to speed some of those answers very quickly. And so I read a whole bunch of different books, and I also joined the multiple organizations where CEOs had roundtables so that I can actually talk to various different people with experience to get up to speed quickly. Um, it's the best that I could do, and I can tell you, without experience, now that matters. So experience mattered the most, and trying different things and hiring and firing and organizing and just trying different things was by far the most valuable lesson. But having the books and having the peers to assist and allow me not to make some catastrophic mistakes was probably the second best thing to do.
Yeah, you've mentioned it twice. The CEO peer groups, so important. There's so many good ones all across North America, but if you're not in one, I highly recommend it because you do really get to help each other, learn from each other, bounce ideas, and again, like you said, prevent some of the catastrophic mistakes from happening, which is good. All right, so you started to learn about what the salespeople were doing. Were they all reporting directly to you, or was there some structure in place with a sales leader?
Oh, let me tell you. So when I took the company over, we were in a terminus period. So there's a number of different CEOs. There's three CEOs that changed over the 2 year period, um, and they all made massive changes to the company. So we went from like cash flow positive to a cash flow negative to massive amounts of debt. Um, the CEO that was in prior to me figured that if one salesperson does $1 million in revenue, then he can just hire six, and they'll do $6 million in revenue. So,
Oh my gosh,
uh,
that math always kills me. Right now, you know why, right? When people say that to me, well, we've got one that does 1 million. Why not 10? And that will be 10 million. I'm like, the math doesn't work like that.
yeah. I mean, uh, I didn't really clearly understand what the problems were at the time, but you learn very quickly. So you are, a sales team is limited by the amounts of leads you get, and 75% of the leads is traditionally generated by marketing, and 25 is expected to be generated by sales. So if you hire six salespeople, you need to be able to generate, 10 times the leads,
Right.
and for them to be able to generate their little 25% piece. So I came in and I had to really clean house, and that was unfortunate because I had to. We were grown, again, and I had to fire, five people immediately, and that
Oh
was
boy.
because they didn't have a sale in some instances up to 9 months, right?
Mm,
And so I had to make the hard decisions right away, and then I also had to rehire, and this is where some of the experience would have been very handy, but. You live and you learn, and I've learned that it's better to make the decisions and move faster while making mistakes than just try and keep the people, train the people, and so on. Unfortunately, in the sales role, it is very difficult, very difficult to keep people for long periods of time that don't perform, and it is more or less expected by the board and by the team that you deal with performance issues. And so I had to learn that very quickly. And engineering, that's completely the opposite. For engineers, you give them the time because a lot of times they're solving technical issues they don't know and they have to learn. But on the sales
right.
side, if a salesperson is not very good, they will not learn. And you spending the time and effort to train them and so on isn't that useful. And I had to learn it the hard way. So we went and rehired, and then I had to fire and hire. So I went through a massive cycle of different salespeople, different training. So I've used maximum amounts of resources available to me for sales training, and Canadian government uh, allowed us to do a whole bunch of grants, and they had different programs for workforce training that we've used, and we brought consultants in, and we did the core gamut of things that you were supposed to do as a CEO to get everyone prepared for this very technical sale. But the the skill set and the quality of the salespeople that were required for this business are very different. In most companies, you can get salespeople and train them in like 2 months, and they can go and they have a short sales cycle. Here, you have um, you have an instance where you're selling to the government and education. They take forever to make a decision,
Yes.
which means that you need to have tact, you need to understand, you need to navigate a lot of the compliance issues. So, selling to the regional government in the United States, you have to be on specific government buy lists. And if you're not, you have to have resellers who are, so you have to go and find the resellers. And that's all on the salesperson. They have to figure out, even if they get a yes, how do they actually go through the logistical process of fulfilling that order. And uh, not everybody can really, not everybody's really skilled to do this. So luckily, I quickly realized that I can't really hire juniors, that I can't train people. I have to have senior personnel that know what they're doing, they have the experience in this sort of sales environment. And once we had that sort of accomplished, and once we had some senior executives doing sales, or should I say, my life got significantly easier, because then
Yeah.
you would have people that came to me and told me what the solutions were, as opposed to just coming to me telling what the problems are, which is what most of CEO life is.
Yeah. I think that's so important figuring that out, right? So we have a sales position and we have maybe a job description and some success factors, but then what kind of person do we really need to fill that role? And yes, it costs less sometimes to hire a less experienced seller, but can you bring them up to speed? Can you teach them what they need to know? And a lot of times the answer is no, you can't. And you really are faced with, hey, we're just going to have to pay more to get more senior people that already have lived this. They understand the complexities of selling to the government. They understand the length of this sales cycle. They understand how it's multi-threaded and there's resellers involved and multiple people. And that really does only come with a more senior person. So tell us, how did you once you arrived with that conclusion, how did you find the right people? Where did they come from?
So I went through like 2.5 years, 3 years of consistently hiring and firing salespeople. And I've tried various different skill levels and various different experience levels and various different sales types. There's different types of salespeople. There's people who are very good at closing. There's people that are good at chasing. There's all kinds of different types, and I had to really find the right type for our industry. And the right type for our industry is a senior leader that's very good at follow up and that's very good at figuring out the logistics of how to get the deals done after they've been sold. Because after they've been sold, they have to logistically be run through resellers or buy lists or compliance lists or whatever. So, uh,
They really have to be very good at project management, it sounds like. So that is a specific type of sale because there's so many pieces that have to get put in place to actually get to the end game.
absolutely. And not technical project management, but the actual compliance project management
Yeah.
and business project management, which is very different. Very few people have that skill. So, we got our senior sales team, and they started performing very well. So we've had the same salespeople for the last 5 years, and they do an amazing job with this sort of complex sale. And that allowed me to really focus on being able to focus on the product and on the sales, which they ran themselves. So it was trial and error. It was a lot of hiring, firing. It was trying to figure out like what skill set do we need. And now that we know, we only hire in that skill set, and it really
Right.
works well.
Did you use recruiters or did you figure out other companies where people existed already with these skills?
I've used everything at my disposal. Again, I've tried everything. I gave recruiters hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you know in the end, what we found works best is if we go after very specific people that we ourselves. So our HR is not traditional HR in the sense that they just push paper. They do a lot more. So I wanted an HR department. They can run my 360 reviews and performance reviews, and they can use those, like, implement the OKR system that we use, like Google Objectives and Key Results. So our HR runs all of those systems within the company, and part of their responsibility is hiring. And I wanted a system where they can source me the candidates. And what they've done is they've went out and they looked at what most of the recruiting companies are doing and implemented like a light system that uses the same sort of steps. And what we do is we go and we hunt very specific people according to our criteria. And we're not in a rush. We do it over a long period of time, and we get the people that we want over time. And in this case, the gentleman who is leading our sales team right now, we were in touch. We were in touch multiple times before he joined us. Eventually, the company he was with got sold, and he was off of the key employee, and he eventually joined us. So it took us a long time to hire the sales leader and subsequently the sales team, but we were in no rush because I really wanted, and through the mistakes, I figured exactly what I want. And that took a long time to find. So it is
Yeah.
not something that you can do quickly. You can get lucky, but it's not something that you can do quickly. And you have to know what you want first. So that
Yeah.
takes experience, I guess.
Well, and it's very multifaceted because first of all, you're the CEO trying to run the entire company. Secondly, now you're like, oh my gosh, we have to rebuild an entire sales team. And that is a full-time job, right? Trying to figure out how to do that. And with a lot of failure mixed in, and have to keep pushing through until you get it
Yep.
and find these people, right? And then you're saying, now we have to take our time because we did these failures. Now we know what we're looking for. It's not going to happen fast, but that can stunt your growth too, because here you are saying, okay, we have capacity, but we don't have the salespeople yet. So were you helping with a lot of the selling while this was all going on and you were trying to rebuild?
Yeah, I think that the number one job of a CEO, especially in a startup, is to sell. You have to be the best salesperson on the team. Nobody will take that away from you. You cannot hire a VP of sales to take that away from you. They will not know as much as you do in 99% of the cases. So I was always doing the demos and the professional services for large accounts. So anybody who was 1,000 employees and over, which is our basically cutoff line, I would go and act as a professional service manager. So I would take my CEO title out of my emails and join the calls with just my first name and do the demos for some of these companies. And I continue to do that. And that's another thing that I would probably mention. Being on demos, especially as a CEO of a mature company, I go on demos now that where we demo more than 10,000 employees, and that keeps you on the ground. It keeps you with one ear um, in the trenches, so that you can see what's going on and what questions you're getting asked and what problems the salespeople are dealing with, and that's, I think, invaluable. So throughout my my employment as a CEO and COO and CTO, I've always been on demos for larger enterprise customers because it gives you insights that you cannot get relayed by the sales team. Um, but then I also want to mention another aspect that you mentioned. It's like it's always a balance between paying a salary. So not only do you need the right skill set and the right mindset and so that, but you have to balance the budget versus the skill set. Because the way I think of it is like it's like a ladder, right? And you have salespeople and you have sales people that fit the skill set and the experience on every rung on the ladder, right? And if you're on this rung, you can't hire a salesperson that's like 5 rungs above you, right? Because they will expect a lot of things. They'll expect a lot of
Yes.
support, then they'll expect a lot of
Yes.
infrastructure. So you basically need to match where you're at and what your team can produce with what the sales organization or sales leader expects. And this, I think, is very important because most people don't think about this. And a lot of times when you try and hire senior salespeople, they just expect millions of dollars of infrastructure, which you may not have, and we didn't have. So working on creating that infrastructure is a project in itself. So you really have to balance all of those things at the same time and try and enable your sales force, but at the same time um, not bankrupt yourself by giving a salary that's completely unrealistic.
Yes, yes, absolutely. It, it really is so dynamic because as the company matures, right? And you have more resources, then you can get a different type of salesperson. But when you get them too soon, like you said, they're expecting all of this infrastructure that you don't have. And because of that, they will fail, right? Because they are used to being inside of that infrastructure that's not there. So you need more of a entrepreneurial type of salesperson until that infrastructure is in place. But then once that infrastructure is in place, sometimes those entrepreneurial salespeople can't switch over to the infrastructure, so they have to go, and you
Yeah.
have to hire different ones. So it's just really a very dynamic process in a growing entrepreneurial type of company. And I see that you have lived that and really felt it. But
I really think that sales is the most dynamic department in a company. Engineering is a lot more monotone. Java development. Java development for years. You develop in Java. Sales is not like that. You're growing. You're consistently growing the company. A $2 million sales organization is not the same as a $5 million sales organization. It's not the same as a $10 million
right.
sales organization. And by definition, it cannot be. So you need to grow with the team. And like you said, different infrastructure provides different challenges. And when people get used to the infrastructure and that needs to evolve so that you can grow the company in those different stages, some people just can't keep up or can't switch to
Yep.
it.
Yeah.
And it caused them not to be successful. And eventually, you know, um, I always think that the best people for the job will you know be at the job, and if that's not the case, so if you have people that are consistently failing, it's probably better to replace them simply because it's better for you, it's better for them, and it's a win-win situation for everyone, even though the process of replacing is not a pleasant one.
Right, exactly. But you're 100% right. It's better for everyone to let people move off to their next adventure. Like, I try not to look at it as something that's detrimental. It's a good thing. Like, hey, we outgrew each other in some way and it's time for you to move on and do something that you're going to be highly successful at. It's not here anymore. And it's just the nature of it. We're going to outgrow certain things. So, it doesn't make it any easier. And like you said, the replacing is not that much fun sometimes. But it sounds like you now have a good process for replacing, and it sounds like you have bench strength. So you've always got your eye on some people in your industry that you're talking to, keeping in touch with, and eventually maybe they'll move over when you're ready or when they're ready, which is really what I highly recommend for every company. It's like that bench strength is critical.
100% agree. And I think that's one of the things that I realized very early. When I took over as CEO, the board, I have a very senior board of directors that are veterans in the industry, and they pulled me aside and they said, your job is two things: to hire the right people and to allocate the resources the right way. So basically, put the right people on the bus, and they will tell you which direction the bus should go, but get the right people on the bus. So I couldn't agree with you more um, that um, that job as a CEO is to make sure you listen, but also to make sure that the right people tell you the right direction, because you cannot do it alone. Um, and the salespeople are a key component, because you can build the greatest software in the world. If you can't sell it, it doesn't really matter. And going back to the original comment that you mentioned in the beginning of the show, most of the time salespeople sell what you don't have. I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, I have come a full circle around on this. I actually think it's a good thing for salespeople to push the boundaries of the product, to sell the stuff that you don't have, so that you can figure out how do you prioritize developing that stuff. So by the time you implement on the sales side, you have everything that they need, because that is the number one benefit of the sales team. As far as feedback to the company, it's like, this is what we need. We need all of these different features that I need to sell now, and you need to build soon, so that we can operate. And I think that's crucial in the entire sales process and in the entire feedback loop on the
Yeah,
company
I
side.
think when there's really good open communication around it, it can be amazing, right? So, hey, this is what we're hearing out there. Can we get this on the product roadmap? How can we work together? Can I sell it now and you tell me when it's going to be delivered? When we have that good back and forth communication, it's so important. And another piece of that is you, like you said, being on the demos as the CEO, because you're staying very close to the customer and you can hear it for yourself and then confirm it with the salespeople. Hey, you hearing this other places too? Tell me what you're hearing, which I love. And I always say that the CEO will always have a role in sales, but that role changes as the company matures. And as you have proven, right, in your own tenure there at the company, but that you are still staying close to the customer, which is the number one thing that makes you be able to do the product development for the future that is really needed. So I really like that. So tell us a little bit about what sales structure looks like now. You said you finally found a great sales leader. Took you a while to get him or her, not sure. And then here they are. And you've got some sellers. Tell us a little bit about what your sales organization looks like today.
Sure, we tried many things. So we tried junior salespeople. We tried an SDR, so two SDRs and one AE, account executive closing. So SDR is drumming up the business and so on. Then we tried reseller. We tried the channel, and after testing all of that plus many other things, we tried different sources for leads and so on. We arrived at our current setup, which is primarily SEO based and PPC based inbound leads. They come to our senior account executives. We do not have SDRs in front of them, because we found that young, you know, young sales executives like SDRs do not help us at all. They do not assist in the sales process. They just confuse things and say the wrong things, and we have to deal with it afterwards. So we have a lot of the leads generated by marketing and some by sales through relationships. They all come into the senior executive team, senior AEs, and they walk through a six-step funnel on the sales side, where you have the qualification and the demo and marketing qualified, sales qualified leads, and then close loss, close one, those sort of things. I will mention one thing that I heard, and I agree with you 100%, and that is that you need to have a very open communication with the sales team. One of the things that we've done in Jatheon, part of our HR whole process, is that we're a fully remote company. Now that's cool, but we were fully remote before it was cool. And we put a ton of infrastructure into remote work. And one of the things that we've noticed is that if you're selling in the United States, you need to have sales team in the United States. If you're selling in Europe, you need to have a sales team from Europe. You cannot cross sell with the existing sales team across borders because there's nuances that those sales people do not understand. So our sales is entirely United States, and we sell primarily to the U.S. market. The second thing is that because you're on remote, you have to have a very candid, very open communication with the sales team, and for that we measure it. And we measure it because we use Slack internally for communication, and there's a Slack report that I get every week, and we aim to have more than 50% of our communication on public channels in Slack. Now that is extremely hard to get to. It took us years and years and years to get there. But this is one of the major advantages of Jatheon is that we keep half of our communication in public channels. So everything that is captured on a CSM side, on the support side, on the sales side, um, on on the marketing side, all that is public, and then we can all funnel all that through different reports into feedback for the product owner team who can take it, refine it, and then make it into a roadmap. That makes a massive amount of difference. I cannot stress how different our internal culture is because we put everything publicly, or half of everything publicly, compared to some of the other companies that I know because I talk to the CEOs. It is imperative. And for a remote company, it makes you go faster. It makes you realize that there are problems much sooner. And it makes the people think that there's value in posting even problems, which is extremely difficult hurdle to overcome. But in the end, it helps the salespeople know what the problems are on the support side or implementation side, and it helps the rest of the company understand what the problems are on the sales and marketing side. And that's one of the key, I think, aspects of why we're successful as a remote company, but also as a company, is because you need to have that very clear, open communication that is not afraid of sharing bad news or
Yeah.
issues.
Well, I'll tell you, alignment is key, and the predecessor to alignment is communication. We cannot get to alignment without the communication, and so having that as part of your culture is phenomenal, right? People are not afraid to say the good news or the bad news. Like everybody wants to hear both, and we're going to use that information. We're going to use that data to just keep getting better. And so I think that's just a phenomenal way to communicate, and using an open tool like that, like Slack, where people can see what's going on in the channels and they can go, oh gosh, I just saw this. I have a little input on that. Even though it might not be my prime area, I still might have some input on it. And because it's in an open channel, I can chime right in. And that's sort of akin to what we used to call the water cooler talk. So when you were in the office and you'd be kind of forming around the kitchen, or what another space in the office, and just chatting, and you'd overhear something, and then you'd be able to chime in and say, one time when we had that problem in another company, we did this, right? And we lose that when we go remote unless you put this culture into place that you have. Just phenomenal. Marko, I've just really enjoyed talking to you so much. And just before we part ways, I have a couple of questions for you. And you know what they are, so they won't be a big surprise. But what is a book that you think every CEO should read?
One of my favorite books for this job isn't actually a business book. It's called Grit by Angela Duckworth.
Yes.
And the reason that I like that book is because it describes what the number one, um, I guess, the number one um, thing is that you need
Quality,
to look.
maybe.
Quality is that you need to look
Yeah.
in a person and that you need to have, and it describes it very clearly, and describes it very succinctly. So highly recommend that, for everything from running a business to having a family and running a family. It really requires a lot of grit, and and trying to measure grit and trying to evaluate for grit is very difficult. And I think that she does a very good job of explaining what to look for. So that would be number one recommended book for any other people coming up in the ranks to a CEO position or other CEOs that haven't read it.
It's a great book, and she has an excellent TED Talk as well on grit. So I love how well the foundation for that information is. She really did some research to understand and help us understand how to locate people with grit, how to understand whether they do or they don't have grit, and make that a part of our culture, right? So if we need people who have grit, we've got to go find those, and we know what happens when we don't. So very good. And what's a podcast that you love because it makes you think differently?
Um, sure. So I'll give you two. My favorite pastime is microeconomics, oddly enough. So I listen to a lot of macro podcasts to understand where the world economy is going to and what is going to be affecting the business in a short to medium term. So I like micro voices because it does allow you to be basically 6 months in the future, seeing what the policies of the government and seeing what the policies of the financial sector are, and it just doesn't give it allows you not to be surprised when they raise interest rates or lower interest rates, and they deal with some of these things that affect medium-sized businesses a lot that otherwise you wouldn't really understand. So that's my go-to. But I also like indie hackers. I like the indie hackers podcast simply because it allows me to hear stories from different people on how they solve some of the very specific problems that otherwise you just wouldn't really think about deeply. So when I'm focused, I listen to macro voices. When I'm in the gym or just need to pass the time, I like to listen to Indie Hackers because it opens your mind to various different things. And I will say I listen to your podcast and many other sales podcasts. So I do use podcasts to get up to speed and just hear different aspects of different areas of the business that I'm not very close to. I listen to marketing podcasts. I listen to all kinds of different stuff over time, and I force myself to do that just so I can
Yeah.
see what's new in the industry.
Yeah, exactly. Bringing new ideas in, right? So important. All right, last question. What does every CEO need to know to win in this marketplace?
Um, I will say that the number one thing that you need to understand is that it takes a long time. And you might be very lucky and you might be running a unicorn and it does take a few years, but by and large, everything that I've been through and everything that primarily what the stories I've seen from the trenches or from other CEOs is that it takes a very, very, very long time. And don't quit. You just need to figure it out and need to keep figuring it out for a very long time to build something that's meaningful. So that's the number one thing. Grit is something you need, and you also need to be in the game for the long run and not, think that you can turn around in a year or whatnot. I mean, a year is almost no time for
Right.
most businesses. So
Exactly. Well, Marco, thank you so much. And where can people find you if they want to learn more about what your company does?
sure. So I run Jatheon. So Jatheon.com is the company website. I'm also very active on LinkedIn, and you can find me on LinkedIn under Marko Dinic, CEO of Jatheon.
And remember, if you decide to connect with Marco, you have to tell him that you heard him here on my podcast, or he's not going to accept your connection request.
For sure, Alice.
All right, very good. Thanks again for your time. I really enjoyed listening to your story, and I wish you all the very best. You're really on a roll now, and it's very exciting. And I'm going to keep my eye on your company. So thanks again.
Thanks, Alice, and thank you for doing the podcast. It is excellent.
If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.